Please welcome trainer and author Rob de Winter and head of solutions consulting for Adobe, Bart Van de Wiele.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I just lost my microphone here, but that's going to be fine. Thank you so much for joining our session today. There are a lot of you, which is absolutely amazing. Big welcome, also a really big welcome to the people who are watching this remotely. We know we had probably over 10,000 people register for this event, which is absolutely insane. That makes us super, super happy. My name is Bart Van de Wiele. I'm the head of solution consulting at Adobe. I'm also an author and a designer, and I'm joined by my friend Rob.
Yeah, I'm Rob de Winter. I'm an Adobe trainer and author, also based in the Netherlands. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this session. Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So maximize your, oh, you guys are really enthusiastic. Maximize your creativity. That is the name of this session here. So creativity is the name of the game for the next hour. Well, you can kind of say it has been the name of the game for the last week, actually, here at Max. And so the objective of this session is for Rob and I to show you a few techniques that we love to use to kind of express, our creativity, because that's important, especially today in the age of AI, where it's just you kind of have your own creativity and be human, basically. And so we're going to take a couple of techniques that we love and use every single day, and we are not only going to be using like the latest and greatest like technology, okay? Because we do think that there are other ways to express yourself, for example, by using more traditional tools, which is exactly why we've also invited a third presenter for this session. So she is a renowned designer and illustrator. Her work has been commissioned by the likes of Google and Nike and Apple, and her work is also part of the permanent collection of the Smithsonian Design Museum in New York, all the way from Australia. Please welcome Gemma O'Brien. Thank you. I'm feeling really good. I think Rob, you too. Thank you so much for being here today. You flew in all the way from Australia, so you have, 20 minutes in the plane? 20 hours, I mean.
I wish it was 20 minutes.
That would be amazing. Yeah. But you had some issues getting in with using just grabbing your artwork with you.
I did. Well, I brought a very special artwork with me that I began and I thought I would show to the audience, but it didn't arrive with me on my flight.
They lost
until I got the call yesterday and they found it, so all is resolved.
That was a very close call. We're really happy to have you here in the session. You brought along a lot of gear, a lot of stuff. You also brought along a couple of slides, so you're going to be taking us through your creative process later throughout this session, so we're all really looking forward to that. So let me just quickly explain what's going to happen here. So we've got Gemma, and so she brought her artwork. We have an overhead camera, and so we have like a little mini studio for her. And she is going to be drawing and painting and then creating some of her amazing artwork here live on stage. So occasionally, I'm going to be checking in with Gemma to see how she's doing, and you're going to be able to see her work here live on stage. So some of the artwork that you've created, so you've supplied some of the artwork to myself and to Rob as well, because again, this is about creativity. And so we're also going to be using some of these design elements that you're actually drawing here in some of the work that Rob and I are working on. Now, obviously, the idea of this session is not to teach people like how to simply replicate the stuff that Gemma is doing, but I want to kind of show you different ways and different avenues how you can basically use some of the work that you have and just take it into maybe a slightly different direction. That's kind of the idea. Now, just like you, Gemma, so you love using a phrase or a keyword within your work. And so Rob and I, we've made a decision just to kind of replicate that a little bit. So we have worked around the word flow. In our example here, now flow could mean anything. That's up to us to interpret that. Air flows and water flows. It could be anything. Basically, that's kind of up to us now. And so Rob's going to kick us off here in just a few seconds and kind of show us how he went from a simple sketch to something that looks a little bit more like what he has on his screen right now, which is a short video. So Rob, you want to take it from here?
Yeah. So what I'm going to create is this video. It's a surrealistic setting, and what I wanted to show you is how you can build a sketch in a 3D program, Project Neo, and then import that into Photoshop, make a sketch there, and then use NanoBanana in Photoshop to create this setting. Then we're going to Firefly boards and then create this video there. So it's really, really nice and to go from a sketch to a nice end result. So let's first start with Project Neo, where I already drew a few cubes, and we're going to build the city as a sketch there. So to build it's just going to be an outline actually. So this is a cube. It's going to be one of the buildings in the city, and of course I want to repeat this a few times. And in Project Neo, you can quickly do that by going to the repeat section here, and then choose linear, and then make sure that you only repeat the x distance, and duplicate the buildings like this. So this is going to be one side of the city, and what we're going to do then is duplicate this like this, and then I'm going to rotate my screen a little bit and change the perspective of my view to perspective, and then we already have something like an outline for the city, so that looks very cool, I think. What I also did was adding some extra buildings to make it a little bit different, but for now I'm just going to leave it with this building and add a text, because the balloons are made out of text. And in Project Neo you can also load all the Adobe fonts, and you can just choose the type tool, click here, and then rotate the text a little bit so that you can, I have to do it like that, rotate it, and then rotate it that way. It's always a bit challenging sometimes. And then move it up, like this. It's not completely ready now. Okay, there it goes. It always happens when you're on stage. Rotation always goes a little bit wrong, but I will just leave it like that. And then just type the word flow in here, flow. And then choose the font that already looks like a balloon a little bit. So it's going to be blow up regular. It's a super nice font. I'm just going to rotate it a little bit, but maybe zoom in. That helps a little bit. And then change the color to red. So it's going to be a red colored balloon. And in Project Neo, you can easily blow up things. You can make them rounded. You can make them extend. So I'm going to change the roundness of the top corner and the bottom corner, and then inflate the balloons a little bit like this. And then you can also, of course, change the spacing of the text by changing the type settings here, and then rotate it a little bit like that. I'm also going to rotate my view like this. And what I did then was importing this file into Photoshop. So what you can do is download it quickly as a PNG. You download it here, choose PNG, click download, and then when you import it in Photoshop, you can add a sketch. So this was my original file. And what I did here was making a nice drawing of a man holding the balloons. And this is super nice because now you can use this drawing or this sketch to create a nice city with a man holding balloons. And nowadays in Photoshop you have the new Google NanoBanana included. When you select your entire screen, you can go to Generative Fill, then fill in a prompt. I already copied it before. It's going to be a surrealistic setting. I'm also going to pick the Gemini 2.5 NanoBanana model, and then click Generate to generate a new setting. So this is going to be cool, because you can quickly go from one simple sketch to an idea. And it's always exciting to see what happens now, of course. It's always a bit of a surprise.
It's always going to be slightly different.
Yeah, always. And this already looks super cool, actually. So it's also super cool how you can go from a simple sketch to something like this. And of course, if you don't like the result, you can click Generate again and get many, many ideas. What I actually wanted to do was also extend this by using the crop tool and then use Generative Extend, like this. Because I want to make a video format. And then we're clicking Generative Expand and then Generate again to make the scene a little bit wider. And that always takes a while, of course, but the results are usually very, very, very cool.
Now, while it's loading, I have a question, Rob. So you went to Neo, a lot of objects and fiddling with the text, etc. And then you do this, and you add a little sketch. You go to Photoshop, and you expand it. Why didn't you just go to Firefly or use Nano Banana and say, I want to have a widescreen image and just have like a very long prompt and just do this in one go? Like, why did you take this route?
Actually, the most important thing is that you have control when you use sketches like this or sketches in Photoshop. When you use Project Neo, you can build your sketch. And I also like it more, actually. When you just generate something, it doesn't feel like you. In this case, you imagine something, and then you can just generate something like this, and it feels like you created something yourself. So that's the most important part for me. Yeah, what I also liked here is that you have to control in Photoshop, because you can use Camera Raw, for example. You can light the setting a little bit better. You can upscale it with the new upscale feature. So that's also what I did in Photoshop. So when you go to Image and then Generative Upscale, you will get all kinds of new models in Photoshop where you can upscale the whole scene and make a larger image. That's not really necessary for this end result, but it can give you better results to maybe also use it on a bigger size. And I personally love the Topaz Gigapixel upscaler, because that gives you very, very good results. And if you want, sometimes if you use Topaz Bloom, for example, it will change the scene a little bit more. But it's super cool, actually. And I already have the end result ready here, so the upscaled version is you can find it here. This is one of the other generations that I made previously. And what I actually want to do is now copy this whole scene and then go to Firefly boards to ideate some ideas, like making a video, making some other scenes of this one image. And maybe a lot of people haven't seen this yet, but you can now go to the share button in Photoshop and then say, okay, send to apps. And then you can copy to clipboard, which is really helpful if you want to paste this into an email or something. But if you copy to clipboard here and then go to Firefly boards, so I already have it set up here, you can paste it in this setting, and then you can do all kinds of things with it. I think many people already saw a lot of things about Firefly boards in the keynotes. So what I usually do is selecting this image, then I go to generate image in Firefly boards, and then say, for example, something like, okay, let's make a night scene, for example. But before I do that, I'm going to change my model to Gemini 2.5 again, to Google Nano Banana, because this will keep your setting almost the same. But you can make it a night scene, for example. Click Gemini 2.5 Nano Banana, then say, okay, make it night, for example. Make it night, and this is very basic, of course, so it can do everything like adding a moon or and when you click generate, then it will use Nano Banana. Oh wait, I forgot one thing, by the way. I need to select my photo as a reference, of course. So click the reference box, click here, and then it will use this image. Click generate, and then it will make all kinds of variations on this scene. And I think it's always super inspiring to see what you can do with all these kinds of things. So let's wait a little bit.
Let's take a few seconds.
Yeah, and there it is. So we move it up the... And I also did this, by the way, with many other images. Just make night scenes, make, for example, a dawn scene with a new sky. I also made some other scenes. I wanted to make it a little bit more surrealistic, based on one of Magritte's images from Belgium. It's from his country.
I'm Belgian, so
he speaks Belgian. Yeah. So and I wanted to change the balloons in an apple. I made a night scene with the moon. I made a night scene with snow. But I also generated the video by choosing one of the images. Then go to the generate video button. Then choose Firefly Video or any other model that you want to use. Select this one of the images as your reference, and then you can generate a video, and that looks like this. So it's super cool. Yeah, And what I also did actually later is that I added some sounds. So I made some sounds with Firefly Sound. Just used my voice to create some peeping sounds of the balloons and collapsing. So yeah, that was super cool. Yeah.
So you went from a sketch to like basically a video.
Yeah.
This is your idea. This is something you can publish or pitch to your customer. Yeah. If we go back in time, 5 years, right?
Yeah.
When you were still young, 5 years. Like, what was stopping you from making these animations or these videos?
Yeah, I think it would just take too long because you would have to make everything in Photoshop, make layers of the balloons, of course, to animate them in After Effects, which is still a fantastic way to do this. But if you want to ideate ideas, that just takes too long.
Exactly.
Now you can make so many ideas just at once, and in a few minutes sometimes, and it still feels creative if you use all the other tools combined with it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the cool things about like what you can do today, right? If you look at like creativity, and especially now in the age of AI, it is just a quicker way just to kind of translate that mental thought that you had, that idea that you had, and then translate that to like an image that's actually finished, and you had total control over the entire process. I think there's a lot of stuff online, like a lot of clickbait saying, oh, graphic designers and AI is going to take over and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of saying like if I give the prompt box to like my aunt that she's going to take over my job, like it doesn't kind of feel that way, to be honest. So, but that's kind of what's implied very often, online, and that's something I think none of us kind of agree with that basically, because like you clearly have a vision. This is how you want to do these things, which is absolutely amazing. And I cannot remember, a couple of years ago when I would doing work for a customer, and I would have already created a whole animation or a whole video just as an idea. That would have cost me like days and days and nights just to work on it. And now it's just a matter of prompting and then explaining that. So again, sketch from finished design. Speaking of sketching, let's check in with Gemma. Gemma, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. Just
You're busy.
standing out in the flow over here.
Okay. What do you do? Can you explain to the audience? Like, there's a camera overhead, so they can see what you're doing now. Like, can you explain what it is that you've been doing?
So I've been doing a little bit of color matching. I've taken one of my original sketches of some leaves here, and I'm starting to incorporate it into this bigger artwork that I'm working on. So it's a combination of analog and digital. Obviously, these pieces have been scanned in, printed out, and now I'm switching between colored pencils and oil pastels to add a little bit of a human touch.
Mm-hmm. And I see you've got some clippings there as well. Is that how you work? Do you just move the clippings into position and you copy them? Like, how does that work?
Yes, it's like the lasso tool in real life. I often will kind of build up this library of elements, and then I think sometimes just cutting things out and moving them around can help visualize the composition.
Yeah.
I'll do it in Photoshop as well, but sometimes just doing it by hand adds a different component. So.
Well, that's great. I have a thing. If I would do that, and if I just made a mistake, I would just kind of think like Command-Z, and that wouldn't work in my head because So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Rob is using a lot of AI.
Yes.
We've seen a lot of AI this week in general. You're doing this, you use more like a traditional method just to make your art. So I'm just wondering, and maybe the audience is wondering as well, how do you, if at all, how do you incorporate AI? Like, how do you look at AI? How do you use it? What does it have value for you? How does it work?
Well, initially, about 3 years ago, when there was the explosion of AI, I was thinking like an artist. Like, I was curious about, what does it mean to give a verbal prompt or written word and translate that into an image. And as an artist that works with typography, I was just intrigued. So I was a curious bystander. Then slowly but surely, over the years, it kind of crept into my work as an organic tool. So if I was presenting something to a client, I might do 4 different designs and then see how AI might iterate on that. Sometimes I would even use AI to say, which one do you think the client's going to choose, and cross-check if it was correct. But more often than not, I'm building on the library of what I have. So I'm using my 15-year career of all of these elements and using AI to kind of enhance that. Or if I get 95% of the way through a project and I've made the artwork and then there's a final change at the end, I might use AI to like quickly see what that might look like rather than redoing the whole thing from scratch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, clearly you're extremely talented. I'm sure you have a very long career ahead of you. I have one more question that I brought for you. So suppose that you were headed more into like a digital tool set in the next couple of years. Okay, let's go crazy. So assume you would be doing that. Where would you invest? Like, would you be exploring more AI because that's something that you want to incorporate in your work? Are you like, nope, I would like to look at, let's say, 3D, for example, or would you be looking at animation to turn these drawings into different animations? Like, where would your gut feeling take you? What would you invest in?
It's a good question, and I think, the beginning stages of my career, it was always I was a tool. Like my body, my hands were the things that were creating the murals, doing these illustrations. But I was always incorporating technology, whether it was like scanning, crossing between analog and digital. Animation felt like the most immediate stepping stone for my work because I always tried to capture motion in a still image, but using AI, I see that it could bring my work to life in a way that maybe 5 years ago, I wouldn't have worked with an animator because I'd be so, fixed on how it might work. But I think it's going to be in unlikely ways again. Sometimes I use AI to Photoshop myself into a mural project to pitch it and win it. So I'm like, I never would have imagined that that would be the way that I would use it. But animation, motion, and creative consciousness.
Okay. Would you ever consider like a complete like exposition just using, let's say, virtual reality, like a virtual reality gallery of the work that you're doing?
Ooh. I wouldn't say no.
Yeah.
But I'm an analog girl at heart, so I would always choose the human approach first.
No, okay. That makes sense. That's great. Thank you. So one of the cool things I think, looking at Gemma's work is, there's an idea, and I'm sure you shoot a lot of pictures as well, and then you have this analog process, which we can take into a digital realm. So I'm not sure how often the audience here has been at Max before, but there's actually a recurring pre-conference session. It's like a 2-day session. It's hosted by Russell Brown, who's like one of the founding fathers of Photoshop back in the day at Adobe. And so one of the cool things I think about that pre-con session is the fact that they often find a variety of different techniques, like basically just wearing costumes and doing photo shoots and makeup and illustration and drawing, everything else. And then you take it into Illustrator and Photoshop and you add animation and AI and you make something that's completely different. That's something I really, really love. Now, Rob, you were one of the people that helped out during that session this year at Max. And so the assignment this year the theme was like Mystique or something like that.
The tarot cards?
Tarot cards, yeah. So the idea was that all the participants, there was like a photo shoot, you can wear different outfits and costumes, and you get to convert yourself into like a tarot card. So you choose your design, and that's like what the project was like. You actually see all the designs back in the Max, the Creative Park, I believe it's called.
Park, yeah.
There's a big gallery there. You can actually see the results there. Now, one of the things I really loved seeing from your end, Rob, was the fact that you actually participated, and you're not just a designer and a trainer and stuff, but you're also a really good musician. And so you actually composed some music, and you played music, and you made drawings, and you took it into Photoshop, and you turned it into like this animation, and you picked the musician. That was your tarot card. That's what you turn yourself into. Let's take a look at something that you brought with us. So you have made like a very short how-to video just to kind of show people how that process worked, combining analog and digital.
Yeah, so there it goes.
Here we go. That was great. Well done. Well done.
Thanks.
That is that's the second reason I hate Rob, because he's so talented. The first one is because he's half an inch taller than I am. That really bugs me.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. So I mentioned before in the introduction, so Gemma, so we've taken some of your artwork. So we were so generous as to give us some of that artwork, and we played around with it. And so Rob had his interpretation for that word. flow. I worked on a couple things myself. So let's quickly move to this laptop here. So what I've done here is I have taken that one illustration that you are currently working on. There we go. So that you're currently working on, which looks like this. So we have a scanned version of that. And my background's in print design and branding and stuff. So I was kind of looking at like, what can I do with these elements just to turn this into like a brand? So I took a font. I love this font I was using here and using Firefly boards. And I was just wondering, what if I simply take these two elements? What if I combine that with the letter G, just to kind of create a brand? Let's say it's from Gemma, for example, right? So what I did was I basically used a prompt where I'm just combining these two together to make something like this, for example, where I simply use two reference images and say, can you wrap these blue leaves around the letter G? And you just keep iterating until you find something that you like. I like the fact that it's actually exposing like the this side of the leaf, which is something that she didn't draw, but the AI was smart enough to kind of pick up on the style and then kind of assume that this is what it would potentially look like. And I kind of kept going, so again, I used the word flow just to have different iterations of that, and just kind of reinterpreting this in a slightly different way. So like some lettering here, I made like some initial letters for myself and Rob, and obviously there's Gemma, etc. And so once you have a basic idea like this, and let's say I have the approval of my customer, that I can start to iterate on this work here. So I can take this and look at different variations. So what I've done here is I said, well, what if I want to use this as part of a branding for, let's say, a hotel chain that does like wellness or maybe a product, for example. So I started to just kind of add like towels, like, why not towels? So let's do this. So I add some towels, and then I kept going until I have like a different version of that rendering where I want to have like more of a 3D style of that. But again, it's kind of retaining that same artwork as like one of the design elements, kind of wrapping or flowing around this letter G here. And now just a matter of making different versions, because traditionally I would have to take this design, take it into Photoshop, and then change that to, let's say, a green color. While here in this scenario, I simply take this and I simply said here, change the blue leaves into green leaves, but update the background to blue. And it just gives me this, And I have different versions, and I have another version here. And I said, well, actually, it's a bit of a premium brand, so let's go for gold instead. And then I just kept going. So I go back down the journey. I was looking at alternatives. Again, making alternatives is really, really easy. So let's assume that you really like, let's say, this version. The only thing you do is you simply click the vary option, and you say, more like this. More like this. And then again, you get these 16 variations, which is then using the Firefly AI engine just to render these 16 variations, just to kind of get a bit of a different look and feel. Now, obviously, I have lettering, I have my towels, and I have my leaves here. I'm just getting different versions of different wrappings and different fonts and stuff. And this is something that I can really use just to look at these different variations, all coming from the initial artwork.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah.
I thought this was a lot of fun. So I think the most difficult bit I always have with these projects is like learning when to stop. Like when you're like, no, I'm done. And you're like, I want more, and you just keep going, right?
The canvas is infinite, so you can...
Canvas is really infinite.
Yep.
So unfortunately, the time we have on these projects is not. So this is a version where the logo is standing, logo top down. I swapped it out with different flavors for the product I currently have. And then I just said, you know what, let's slap this on an actual a bottle or an actual product here. So I added like natural glow motion. Then I asked it to generate a close-up. So again, if you want to see what that looked like, I basically said create extreme close-up of the embossed logo on the gray bottle. The camera is extremely zoomed in, up and close by. That's kind of the whole gist of it. And I kind of like the embossing on the bottle. That looks like something that's a lot cooler than just simply printing it. And then converting it to video, it is really going to highlight that embossing with the light that kind of falls onto it. But then obviously products need to be used by people. So it's time to bring in some people. So what I've done here is I just kept working on it. So it's a bit cheesy, I understand. It's always the same image, but just kind of have something, right? Just kind of see it in action. How big is the bottle? How large should the product be? I have no idea. So this is something I can kind of experiment with to see what looks and feels right, okay? Is this like a really fine thing for me from like a luxury hotel, or is it like a really big thing that I get to use and sell? So I've got a similar thing here, turn the image into a street ad visible at a bus stop in the streets of Paris. Clearly, I've got this here. She's really enjoying this product. Look how happy she is. It's just absolutely amazing. Yeah,
I would love it, actually.
You would love it. Well, Rob, like I said, I did this. And then there's Rob's. I used Rob. So
I love that on my face,
Yeah. Your skin has never looked younger, Rob, I have to say.
Younger and younger.
Younger and younger, it's just insane. Anyway, let's go back, let's backtrack, let's go back here. So let's go down, let's go down here. And so I took a second element that Gemma gave us, which is basically just a piece of rope. What can you do with rope? So I was kind of thinking, again, combining this with typography, if I just type basic letters and have this rope here, I can ask the AI, in this case, again, it was Gemini, so Nano Banana, I can simply do things and say, you know what, take these two images and wrap the rope in the image around the letters following the shape of the letters. So this is one version. This is a version where I simply asked, now make it one continuous rope, and then another one, and another one, and basically keep going. And so based on that, you have a version. I wanted to add some flowers here, get some flowers there, and then obviously there's birds and bees. I'm sure there's the bees, the bees. There you go. So this is another thing that you can basically do just to work on something. And since we both really like typography, and then obviously this is something that definitely Gemma does on a large scale in her different murals, we kind of wanted to go down that little rabbit hole of doing more with typography. So Rob, you kind of took it from there at that point.
Yeah, so what I did actually was type the whole alphabet in Firefly boards. You can just use the type tool there, and then combined this rope from Gemma with the alphabet, and then created all kinds of things like this. Sometimes it misses a letter, but you can combine everything together. You can generate it multiple times and then combine it in Photoshop again. What I did then was I thought, okay, maybe we can make a font out of this. So I copied this image into Adobe Illustrator. So I'll just show you this. This is the thing I did. So I copied it into Illustrator, then traced it with the image trace feature, and then I used a plugin called FontSelf to make a nice font. And you can just place all the letters next to each other, drag it into this plugin, and then it will make a font for you, which is super cool. Actually, if you haven't tried this plugin yet, it's I think it's not so expensive to buy. And you can, from this plugin, you can install the font directly on your computer and then use it to type something else. So I installed this font. Here we have the H, and if we type hello, for example, you can see that you can type with this font you made in Firefly boards, used it in Illustrator, and then brought it further. What I did then was create a new artboard. So I typed Fate, and then brought it back into Firefly boards. And then you can do something else with it again, like, okay, let's make a rope font and let's make an image based out of that rope font again. And then Firefly boards created all kinds of things together with Google Gemini, of course, Nano Banana. And we just tried a few things, actually, just some rope fonts on a pier near the sea. And what I also did was creating this image, so this image with Fate, and I transformed that into ropes, just on the pier, actually, and then use this as a starting point for a video, and this as an end point for the video, and try to start from the ropes, and then end up with the word Fate, and that looks like this. So I did this with Firefly Video, by the way, which is super cool to just ideate a few ideas, actually.
Yeah,
so, and then you go from Firefly boards to Illustrator, and then you end up with this.
Really cool. Really cool. So again, ideation, illustration, combined with a font that you like, turn this into an actual font, type something with it, ideate with the thing you were ideating with before, and then you end up with video again. So again, massive, it seems like a lot of work, but it's just so much fun, right? Again, knowing when to stop, that's probably the most important thing here. Yeah. But you have total freedom. And again, it's really like democratizing that creativity with all the tools that we basically have, and Firefly boards is a really good tool for that. Gemma, I'm going to take a look here at the work that you're doing. So, Gemma, so you combine lettering and words and flowers and nature and typography, like everything together, which looking at the video that you showed as well, like your entire career looks absolutely amazing. And so you do this you start from a smaller scale, like on a page, and then you make massive murals out of that. So there's a whole creative process there. And I mentioned before that, when I introduced you initially, that you brought along a couple of slides and a story for the audience. So I think maybe it's a good time for you just to maybe go through that story now and show us how you work.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Rob and Bart.
Stage is yours. Yeah.
Give them a round of applause. Now, we saw some very cool technology, and I remember hearing an excellent quote once that was, an amazing piece of technology is another human being. So I'm going to give the analog counterpart to the amazing work that Rob and Bart showed today. So as we discussed, my work, the goal that I've always been chasing for the last 10 years is to elevate words to art and combine the handmade and the digital to create large-scale installations and murals that combine color, pattern, emotion. It's appeared from everywhere from billboards, posters, packaging, and Porsches. But today, I'm going to share with you a little bit of the story of how my career began and give you an insight into the 3 pillars. We're in Los Angeles, so I like to think of my skill set as a triple threat. It's painting, calligraphy, and drawing, and it began in nature. So I think as creatives, we all have very hungry eyes, and for me as a young girl growing up in nature, the first obsession was flowers and plants. So we saw a little bit of an insight into the beginnings of this process, but what the plan is for this final little part of our session is to bring as much of my studio space that existed in Sydney onto the stage and show you in real time. So let's switch over to the camera on the table now, where I can show you what I like to think of as my own Gemma O'Brien stock library of elements that I've used over the years. So one of the things that I love about drawing from nature is that my environment shaped me. So wherever you grow up, wherever you exist as a creative in that moment, it's really great to draw what's around you or be inspired by your immediate surroundings. So for me, that is, plants and flowers. And over time, this expanded in ways that each element had a personal connection. So if I'm going to start integrating this with technology, it still has a story that connects with it. So Harpoolia is a native flower from where I grew up in Mount Glorious. This was a magnolia from the Blue Mountains in Sydney, Australia. And there are many different ways to draw, and obviously drawing is another tool that allows you to express yourself. But I think one of the most important things is when working with the speed of new technology is to draw or create in a way that is unique to you. So for me, my method of drawing used the tools around me. So I would take photographs of these flowers, play with the contrast in Photoshop, scan them, print them, redraw them, and it was all about trying to capture this detail, almost like a lithography. And I wasn't using any, traditional tools of observational drawing, any methods. I was simply following my gut instinct. So this is the style that emerged, and gradually over 10 years, as I started to incorporate these into my pieces that included typography, it became my signature style. So I think if you're a creative working beyond a client brief, it's not necessary that you need to say, this is what I do, but it's something that if you keep on following your instincts over time, you will start to develop something that feels like your own. So nature was my first love, and the second one was language and typography. So with the individual elements and scanning them in, if you want to know a little bit more about how to do that yourself, if you have some pieces at home, there's a max in a minute video online that shows you a very quick process of scanning and retaining that transparency when you bring those hand-drawn elements into Photoshop as well. So my first loves was nature and typography, but my world was very black and white. So I was interested in bringing this detail and the pattern and the intricacies of nature to the written word, and finding a way that it felt like it was all very cohesive. So it wasn't about separating the typography and illustration into elements, but merging them into one holistic piece. And if anyone's followed the trajectory of AI over the last 3 years, you would have seen at the beginning that it couldn't spell, it got the letters mixed up, and very quickly that's changed. But the reality is, whatever the inputs are, they're going to create something in that mode. So for me, it's about keeping on updating my own input. So the inspiration that comes into my work, leaning back into the rules of typography, thinking about how can you push the levels of legibility so it still feels really refined and it connects with people. And I think that for me, that's going to be the draw card that keeps me connected to the analog process. So beyond drawing, which is quite a slow process, the other aspect of typography that I loved was calligraphy. And calligraphy allows you to step beyond the bounds of drawing and be really expressive. So without formal calligraphy training, I originally just started, again, experimenting with different tools. Ruling pens, balsa wood, and this calligraphic style, I was inspired by people like Luca Barcelona, really defined the second chapter in my career. So can somebody give me a word? Think about maybe a 5 to 7 letter word. Ooh, that's definitely more than 7 letters, but I'll take it. Resilience. May I ask why you chose that word?
I guess it embodies me.
I love it. Okay, let's go. Resilience. Is it too late to request music? Now, I might take a few goes. Let's see. Can you spell it for me? Resilience, right? Can we spell, or have we offloaded that to the robots too? Is that correct? It could be more beautiful. Let's try one more time. Thank you. Now, what was the phrase that we gave to the generative AI? More like that? More like this? Give me a prompt. Resilience. Oh. I'm only human. Okay, take 3, take 3. Whew. Brazil. We got there. Thank you for that word. Now, the thing with calligraphy is that although it looks fast and effortless, it's made up of lots of small steps and lots of breaking it down into smaller things and putting them together to make them look fast over time. So if you think about calligraphy, it might also be easy to think about it like choreographed writing. Wait, let's just see if this is going to fit. So if you break it down into the individual elements, if you think of an M, or an M like this, although it seems quite fast and quick to draw, you could think of the downstrokes, which are really all just simple angled strokes, holding the pen at a certain angle and maintaining that consistency. And then if you think about the upstrokes, it's like a controlled flick. You want it to be thinner and lighter than the downstroke. And then when you draw in a downstroke and an upstroke, down, up, down, you start to see a letter like an M. If we then wanted to introduce something so you can see what maybe like an A or a G looks like, we really just want to take that downstroke, put it into a curve, so you can practice your curved downstrokes, and then combine them together. Curved downstroke, light upstroke, downstroke, and you've got an A. And then you can get really expressive with the flourishes once you put it all together. So is there one final word that we have today? Banana. Is that because there's Gemini 2.5 nano banana or something going on? Okay, let's do it. Banana. Oh, this is a good one because it's actually demonstrating all of the things that I just showed you. So we've got the curved downstroke, the upstroke. Banana, oh my God. Banana. Okay, yes. Actually, I lied. I've got a couple more words. Now, when I arrived, I was speaking to a few people in the audience who graciously told me about their fantastic experience at Max. So shout out to Max, who's over there. Then there was also, is it Amanda, whose seat I was sitting in? Yes. Okay. So I sat next to your friend, Amanda, and he said, she's here to see you, but she's not here yet. And so I thought that I would write your name. There you go. You can come and collect that at the end. And one more, I don't want to use up all of the time on calligraphy, but I asked Michaela, I said, what's your highlight of Max been? And she said, she watched the keynote, and it was exciting and scary to see what was happening with AI. And I said, what are you scared of? And she said, my job. And is this correct, Michaela? Yes. So fear and love are the same thing, and thank you so much for coming. I will give you these pieces of calligraphy at the end. That ends the calligraphy chapter of our show. So we've got drawing, we've got calligraphy, and the final pillar is painting. So working small scale by hand, I started to realize that I loved the embodied feeling of making work. And as I started to scale my work upwards, it brought everything together. So my small scale drawings were translated onto walls, and I continued to work in black and white to bring both the calligraphy and the drawing elements into these large scale hand painted installations. And one of my first art pieces was actually in the Laguna College of Art and Design, this installation that I created back in 2012, and it was inspired by all of the language that we encounter in the digital world. So prove you're human, when we were trying to prove that we were human for our robots, we were so far advanced from that now where this is actually feels like a real prompt that we need to think about from a philosophical point of view. But I loved the way that you could incorporate text into a room and experience it with your whole body. It could be something that was transient, that could only live in your memory, and that often involved a number of humans working together to paint it over time. And the art gallery was a space for me, even though I was working as a commercial designer, that really allowed me to experiment under conditions of time and space. Each of the longer walls felt like a big layout that I was working with. And what would happen was each of these styles would be then the thing that a client would ask for a number of years later. However, I started to realize that as much as I had grown in what I was creating and I was loving this new practice that combined all these elements, I was still trapped in the world of black and white. And I stood on a stage at Adobe conference in Singapore many years ago and said, I'm going to start working in color. And I think that sometimes as creatives, some weird little things like having fear of color can actually feel quite big. And it was technology that actually allowed me to overcome that fear. I started playing around with things like the Wacom pen and the Apple Pencil and Adobe Draw. Can we bring back Adobe Draw? I loved Adobe Draw. Yes. We got a few people who are also rooting for Adobe Draw. But what happened was it allowed me to experiment with color in a way that I would have been working very slowly by hand. And it was this new explosion of color in my work. It was bright, it was bold, it was driven by this whole period where backlit, highly saturated images were filling our feeds on social media. And it was the perfect way for me to enter this new phase that I never would have expected. I was very resistant to playing around with these tools, but it really allowed my work to go in a new direction. And so slowly but surely, that then translated into not only my murals, but of my text-based work as well. But what I started to notice was that as much as I loved working in color and combining these elements, it still felt a little bit digital, and I wanted to bring back that handmade process. So what I would do is I would use Illustrator as a design tool, as a drawing tool, in the same way that I would draw in pencil by hand. I might use a very simple existing font like Futura, and then bring in some of these hand-drawn elements, and then find a way to translate them to analog. So this is the original design that you can see on the screen for an artwork that I did in a series of exhibitions that involved screen prints. So there was like basically 6 to 7 color screen prints. And you can see here now one of the final pieces. So it still looks quite digital, but then once you come up close, this is where I would then bring back in the hand-drawn component. So it's got like this gold this gold section right here. And building on the digital framework, I would then come back in and hand paint some of the other details. And one thing that I love that Rob and Bart talked about is this idea that you have so much possibility when you have the speed of technology. And so then how do you create the rules? Like, when do you stop? And sometimes the stopping is a client deadline. Sometimes the stopping is you need to go to sleep. But I think as an artist, sometimes you can create your own rules for what your work is to become. And I think that working by hand, for me, is a way to slow down. It's a way to get your body and mind in sync. And I think attention now is like one of our biggest tools that we can have as artists, designers, and creatives. So if there's a way that you can harness your attention and it still feeds your creative process, sometimes working by hand is the way to do that. However, I would say that it's a luxury. We all know the speed that the world operates in client deadlines, and sometimes working slow might mean you lose a job or miss a deadline. So it's about finding that right balance between working by hand and working digitally. So I'm not going to go too far into this piece, but essentially that's just a little bit of a demo that shows how I would switch between the analog and the digital process. And the final thing I'm going to show you today is translating from small scale to large scale. One of the biggest questions I often get asked is how do you then take that to these giant walls? So essentially, once I have a design in place, perhaps it's working with, in this case, it might be like a really elongated wall. I will then move into translating like the pencil outlines onto a wall. And initially, I used a projector to do that. And then over time, I needed some new tools. And in this instance, I went back in time to find a new tool to translate it to the wall. So are there any sign painters in the room or anyone with a background in sign painting? Does anyone know what an electropounce is? Yes, we've got one hand up for an electropounce. So that tool that you can see that I'm using there, it's basically like a little zap on a steel background, and it's making tiny perforated holes. So, the Renaissance painters used to have paper people that they would translate these big designs onto the frescoes. So this is like a modern day version of that, where it's basically taking a design, making tiny holes in it, and then you translate that onto the wall using charcoal. So you're patting little bits of charcoal, and it just leaves a tiny bit of pencil so that you can see where to paint. And then we'll move into a space, into a gallery with those pencil outlines, with the design signed off, color match each of the elements, and with a team over a course of about a week or sometimes 2 weeks, bring the murals to life. And it's this process of, incorporating all of the elements of drawing, painting, moving into a space, working with a team that still really fulfills me creatively. And as I move into the future, the goal will still continue to be to work with language and to find ways to elevate it to art and create these immersive experiences for people over time. So that is the triple threat of drawing, calligraphy, and painting. And I just wanted to say thank you and invite Rob and Bart back onto the stage.
That was really amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. It looks absolutely spectacular. Thank you for doing the calligraphy for the people in the audience. It's amazing. I have a question, though. If you would not be painting and drawing and doing art, what would you be doing?
Astrophysicist.
Okay.
That might take me a few years.
It might
Or
take you
selling
a couple
flowers at the markets.
That's also nice, That's also nice. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you or maybe even hire you for the next project?
Sure.
Where should they go?
They can go to GemmaO'Brien.com or find me on Instagram at Mrs. Eves101. Any font nerds will know what that means. That's it.
Okay. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's really appreciated. Rob, thank you so much, you two, for being here and presenting all of your work. I think it's absolutely amazing. I think looking at both digital and analog, like combining this together, like maximizing creativity, I really hope you all feel a bit more creative and a bit more inspired compared to like an hour ago when you first walked into the session. So thank you all for being here. Also the people watching this remotely, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Max and see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.